I'm in a really busy environment and I'm having a hard time to record this video. But the video is about just that. It is about how your brain actually deals with all that data, how it decides what to pay attention to. Did you ever think about that? Because theoretically, you can perceive so many things at this very moment. Right now, you're probably hearing that there are birds tweeting. You probably hear that there are other people moving around. And then, if you're not just paying attention to what you're hearing in this video, you'll probably feel what your feet feel like in your socks if you go there with your attention. And there are a ton of other things that at the moment you could theoretically perceive. And when you think about that, it's crazy that you're actually able to pay attention to anything. And in this video, I want to explain to you, see, another thing I'm paying attention to. So how does your brain decide what to pay attention to? Because theoretically, there are millions of bits of information available every second, and your brain can only consciously perceive a few. There are a couple of different calculations for that, but the actual percentage of what of those information you can perceive goes in the 0.6 something. So it's very, very little. And depending on how you measure, there will be different numbers, but the fact is, it's only very little. So what plays a role in deciding of what to pay attention to? Well, the first thing is stories, hypotheses, and narratives. Your brain has narratives. And right now, you have already unconsciously developed a couple of narratives about me. And your brain is then only paying attention to the things that go with the narrative that you've already created. So for example, if your narrative right now is, this video is boring, then you will only pay attention to the things that actually prove you right. If on the other hand, your narrative right now is, this is crazy interesting stuff, I want to find out more, then your brain will mainly pay attention to the things that prove this theory right. And that is so crazy because you're still watching the same video. If you would re-watch the video at a later point in time with a different narrative in mind, you would see different things. And that's the same not just for videos, but also for our memory. So when being asked about traffic accidents, for example, people will describe different situations if they are prompted with different questions. So for example, if people are asked at what speed the cars crashed into each other, they will give different answers compared to if they're asked at what speed the cars bumped into each other, even though they are watching exactly the same video. And that is crazy. So this is how our perception gets shaped by the narratives and stories in our mind. And humans have always been great in telling each other those stories and narratives. Every great story that is well known, from every religion to every myth, has its origins in some sort of observation that a human brain tried to make sense of by telling a story. So why does this all matter? Well, first of all, I believe it's really interesting because there is no truth, there is no reality. It's all just stories made up in your mind, and they can so easily be influenced by even a single question like you've just heard with the traffic accident. But it gets more interesting when you start to interact with other people. And you have probably heard about the self-fulfilling prophecy. That is a great example for just that. And I need to get something to write that down. You've probably heard about the self-fulfilling prophecy in several different contexts. Sometimes people think it's some esoteric stuff, but it's in fact science. So you can prove that the self-fulfilling prophecy exists. And in order to explain that to you, I want to tell you a little story. A few years ago, I was invited to host a keynote in front of teachers. And well, the keynote's topic was learning. And if you've ever talked to somebody about something that they supposedly know, it's always slightly tough, right? And especially sometimes teachers can be a tough crowd. And so in my mind, there already was a pre-existing story about how this presentation might possibly go. And this is where the self-fulfilling prophecy begins. Because the self-fulfilling prophecy starts with your thoughts of yourself. Nobody knows those, right? Nobody knows what you are thinking of yourself in that very moment. But it begins with those. So for example, in my case, I thought that I'm not good enough for that crowd. That was the effect. I was scared. So when going into the presentation and you have that thought, it's just a thought. But of course, you will start acting in a certain way. And your thoughts always shape your behavior. So if I think I'm scared, well, I will act in a certain way. I will probably move around a lot more on stage than I was planning to. Or I will look nervous. And you know all the telltales of people looking nervous. And now comes the interesting part. Because previously, it was only my thoughts and my story about the situation. And now, as soon as it shapes my behavior, well, it becomes visible. People will be able to see that. So, my behavior then influences others, people's perception of me. So if it influences their perception and their stories, it will influence their thoughts. And first of all, like with my thoughts, I can't see their thoughts. I cannot see what my audience thinks. But as their thoughts then shapes their behavior, well, I can see their behavior. Well, they will simply act in a certain way based on their thoughts, like I did in the beginning. And now comes the interesting part, because if they think, this guy on stage, he's probably not really well prepared, he's nervous, he's scared, they will act in that way. And by acting in that way, their thoughts and their behavior will amplify my own thoughts. And that's where the circle is closed. Let me go through this once more really quickly. Whatever thoughts I have of myself, they will shape my own behavior. My own behavior is visible to other people. So that behavior influences how other people think of me. And how other people think of me, well, that influences how they behave. And how they behave, well, I can see. And this then amplifies my own story. And this is the point, because it can go in a very negative way, but it can also go the other way. So this can also be quite positive. So for example, if I had gone on stage with the thought, I'm gonna rock this today, then this would have been my narrative. And if it's my narrative, then my brain, remember, my brain will only look for proof why this is right. So I will look into the audience and only see why I'm just right now rocking this presentation. And then this will amplify the way I feel. And this is so crucial, because we're only ever seeing such a tiny bit of the reality. And the story that I have in mind at every given moment shapes how I'm experiencing it. So by now you might ask, that's interesting. Now, what can I do to influence my own stories about the world or about what I'm perceiving? And I give you 7 minutes of recording space left. I need to make use of that. And I want to give you one example that you probably have heard of, but maybe not in that context. And that example is a mantra. Maybe you've heard of a mantra in a yoga or spiritual context. A mantra, first of all, is a statement, a short sentence, like, I am okay, or I am powerful. But it can be more. It can also be connected to a melody. It can be a whole song. Now let me give you an example for a mantra. And for that, I want to take you back to the story that I mentioned before. Because in another occasion, for another keynote, in the morning before the keynote, I was sitting on a rower in the gym and was listening to a song by a band that I really love. They're called the Raconteurs. I never know if I pronounced them correctly. Raconteurs. And in that song, there's one line that's repeated over and over and over again. And the line is, I'm here right now, I'm not dead yet. I'm here right now, I'm not dead yet. Until the end of the song. And I was on the rover listening to that song, and this kind of got burned into my system. And I still get goosebumps right now when I'm repeating that. Later, when I went on stage, I still had that song in mind. I'm here right now, I'm not dead yet. And my thoughts were, now I can show what I'm able to do. This is my moment. And this was what I was paying attention to. And so the power of this mantra is that it acts as this narrative, as this story to shape your perception. And in my case, well, I was only paying attention to, I'm here right now, I'm not dead yet. Let's make this moment count. And if you find something like that, you can use that in any situation. Doesn't matter if it's on a stage, doesn't matter if it's a tough conversation. So if you pay attention to your own stories, to your own narratives, you will create the moments that you're in. You will shape the reality that you're perceiving, because there isn't the reality, as numerous examples show. Be aware of your stories. Change your own stories, and then you live a different life. It's possible. Whew. 1 minute left. Made it.